My name is Maya Chen. I'm 32 years old, and at my birthday dinner in a cafe in downtown Seattle, my mom whispered to my brother, "While everyone's here, go and change the locks at her apartment." I watched him nod, grab his jacket, and disappear into the rain-soaked night. An hour later, he stumbled back, paler than the white tablecloth, and whispered 5 words that made my blood run cold. "Mom, there's someone inside. If you think this story ends with birthday cake and apologies, you're wrong. Hit that like button, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. You know what's funny? I actually thought this birthday would be different. 32 years old, and I'm still hoping my mother would see me as something more than a problem to solve. I'd pick the Emerald Café in Capitol Hill, this beautiful place with exposed brick walls and fairy lights strung across the ceiling. It was expensive, sure, but I wanted one night. Just one night where I could pretend we were a normal family. Where my mom would actually celebrate me instead of trying to control me. I paid for everything, of course. The entire dinner, every plate, every drink, every slice of that overpriced chocolate ganache cake they brought out with the candles. My mom didn't even reach for her wallet. She never does. It's like she believes that because she gave birth to me, I owe her everything forever. My time, my money, my dignity, all of it belongs to her by default. The table was full that night. My mom, Patricia, sitting at the head like she always does, even though it was my birthday. My dad, Richard, beside her, quiet as usual, letting her run the show. My brother Ethan was there with his fiancée Jessica. She seemed uncomfortable the whole time, and now I know why. A few family friends rounded out the group. People who smile at you while secretly judging every decision you've ever made. Let me tell you who I am, so you understand why this betrayal cut so deep. I'm a pediatric nurse. I work 12-hour shifts at Seattle Children's Hospital, taking care of kids who are fighting for their lives. I hold their hands during chemotherapy. I sing to them when they're scared. I've watched children take their last breaths, and I've celebrated with families when their babies finally get to go home. I do this job because I believe in protecting the vulnerable, in standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And I'm a single mom to the most incredible 6-year-old girl you've ever met. Her name is Zoe. She has my dark hair and her father's hazel eyes. Not that he stuck around long enough to see them. He left when I was 4 months pregnant, said he wasn't ready for the responsibility. So I did it alone. I went through pregnancy alone, labor alone, every sleepless night, every fever, every first word and first step, alone. And you know what? I wouldn't change it. Zoe is my entire world. She's the reason I wake up at 5 in the morning, the reason I work those brutal shifts, the reason I keep going even when I'm exhausted down to my bones. My mom has never once told me she's proud of me for any of it. Not the nursing degree I worked 3 jobs to afford. Not the fact that I'm raising a beautiful, kind, intelligent daughter on my own. Not the fact that I've built a life that's stable and good and mine. Instead, she criticizes. My apartment isn't big enough. My car's too old. I work too much. I don't discipline Zoe properly. I'm too soft, too emotional, too incapable of making adult decisions. According to Patricia Chen, I'm basically a child playing dress-up in an adult's life. So when my grandma Rose died 3 months ago, it wasn't just grief that hit me. It was the loss of the only person in my family who ever truly saw me. Grandma Rose was my mom's mother, but you'd never know they were related. Where my mom is cold and calculating, Grandma Rose was warm and fiercely protective. She was a World War II nurse. Can you believe that? Served in field hospitals in Europe, saw things that would break most people, and came home stronger. She taught me what real strength looks like. Not control, not manipulation, just quiet, unshakable courage. When she got sick last year, pancreatic cancer, fast and vicious. I was there every single day. I'd finish my shift at the hospital and drive straight to her place. I'd cook her meals, manage her medications, read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. My mom visited maybe twice a month, always complaining about the traffic or how depressing it was to see her mother like this. My dad didn't come at all, said he couldn't handle seeing her deteriorate. Ethan came once, stayed for 20 minutes, and never returned. But I was there, and in those final weeks, Grandma Rose told me things. Stories about my mom that made so much suddenly make sense. How Patricia had always been obsessed with money and status. How she'd married my dad not for love, but because he had a good job and came from a respectable family. How she'd tried to control Grandma Rose's life too, pushing her to sell her apartment and move into a nursing home so Patricia could access the equity. Grandma Rose refused, and she made sure that when she died, Patricia wouldn't get what she wanted. She left her apartment to me, not to my mom, not split between her children, to me. A beautiful 2-bedroom unit in downtown Seattle, worth about $850,000. Prime real estate in one of the hottest markets in the country. It was more than a gift. It was a message. Grandma Rose was telling me that she trusted me, that she believed in me, that I deserved something good. The will was crystal clear. I have a copy on my phone. I've read it so many times I can recite it from memory. To my granddaughter Maya Chen, I leave my apartment at 415 Pine Street, Unit 12B, along with all furnishings and contents therein. She has shown me unconditional love and devotion, and I trust her to honor this gift. Under no circumstances is Patricia Chen to have access to, control over, or claim to this property. Under no circumstances. Grandma Rose knew exactly what she was doing. She knew my mother would try to take it from me, and she did everything legally possible to prevent it. But here's the thing about people like my mother. They don't accept boundaries. They don't respect your wishes. They see what they want, and they take it. Consequences be damned. From the moment the will was read, Patricia started her campaign. Maya, honey, you're not ready for this responsibility. Let me help you manage it. We could rent it out and I'll handle the tenants. Or better yet, let's sell it and invest the money properly. You need someone with experience to guide you. Every conversation, every phone call, every family dinner, she'd bring it up, wearing me down, trying to make me doubt myself. You're a single mother, Maya. You work full-time. How are you going to maintain a property? What if something breaks? What if there's a legal issue? You need me. I told her no. Over and over and over, I told her no. The apartment was mine. Grandma Rose wanted me to have it. I would figure it out on my own. But she wouldn't let it go. She'd call me at work, show up at my place unannounced, corner me at family events. The pressure was constant, suffocating. I should have seen what was coming. Looking back now, all the signs were there. But I was grieving. I was exhausted. And I made the mistake of trusting my own mother. When she asked for the spare key, just in case of emergencies, I gave it to her. When she offered to clean out the apartment because it would be too painful for me to go through Grandma Rose's things, I let her. When she told me not to visit for a few weeks while she organized everything, I listened. I was such an idiot. Such a trusting, naive idiot. So there I was at my birthday dinner, trying to enjoy myself despite the undercurrent of tension that always exists when Patricia Chen is in the room. We'd just finished the main course. I'd ordered the salmon, which was incredible, and the server was bringing out the cake. Everyone started singing happy birthday, and I was smiling, blowing out the candles, making a wish that I knew wouldn't come true. I wished for 1 year of peace. 1 year without my mother making me feel small. That's when I heard it. The whisper. My mom leaning toward my brother, her voice low but not low enough. While everyone's here singing, slip out. Change her locks. Use the spare key from my purse. I'll text you the locksmith's number. My blood turned to ice. I kept smiling, kept nodding as people clapped. But inside, I was screaming. She was going to change my locks, at my apartment, without my permission. While I was sitting here celebrating my birthday, she was planning to lock me out of my own inheritance. I saw my dad nod in agreement. Just a tiny movement of his head, but it was there. He was in on it. They'd planned this together, timed it perfectly. Wait until Maya's distracted, surrounded by people, unable to make a scene. Then, take what's hers. Simple, efficient, cruel. Ethan stood up, making some excuse about needing to grab something from his car. My brother. My younger brother, who I used to protect from bullies in school, who I helped with his homework, who called me crying when his first girlfriend broke his heart. He was really going to do this. He grabbed his jacket, took the spare key from Mom's purse, right there in front of me, like I was invisible, and walked out into the Seattle rain. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just sat there, cutting my cake into precise pieces, passing them around the table. Inside, I was calculating. How long would it take him to drive to the apartment? 20 minutes in this weather. Maybe 25. How long to change the locks? A professional locksmith could do it in 30 minutes. So I had about an hour before he'd be back. An hour to decide what to do. My mom was watching me. I could feel her eyes on my face, looking for any sign that I'd heard her. But I've learned how to hide my emotions over the years. You don't survive growing up with Patricia Chen without developing a really good poker face. So I smiled and ate my cake and chatted with the family friends, while rage built inside me like a pressure cooker about to explode. 70 minutes passed. The longest 70 minutes of my life. I made small talk. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I thanked everyone for coming. And I waited. My phone was face down on the table, but I could see it light up with a text message. I didn't check it. Not yet. Then Ethan came back. And oh God, his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. No, like he'd seen something so much worse than a ghost. His skin was gray, actually gray, and his hands were shaking so badly he had to shove them in his pockets. His eyes were wide, darting around the table like he was looking for an escape route. My mom noticed immediately. Her whole body went rigid. "Well?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Did you handle it?" Ethan's mouth opened and closed a few times before any sound came out. "Mom!" His voice cracked. "There's someone inside." The entire table went silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away, like the whole world was holding its breath. "What do you mean, someone?" My dad's voice, louder than I'd heard it in years. Ethan looked like he was going to be sick. I used the key, opened the door. The lights were on, all of them. I could hear voices. 2 people, maybe more. They were arguing about something. I saw shadows moving in the living room. "Mom, I think someone's been living there." My mother's face went white. Not pale, white. Like every drop of blood had drained straight to her feet. My dad stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "That's impossible. The apartment's been empty since Rose died." But I was already reaching for my phone. The text message was from an unknown number. 911 emergency. This is Seattle PD. Incident reported at 415 Pine Street, Unit 12B. Tenant on record, Maya Chen. Please respond immediately. Tenant on record. Someone was living in my apartment. In Grandma Rose's apartment. And somehow, the police knew about it before I did. I stood up, grabbed my purse. My hands were steady now. The shock had burned away, leaving nothing but cold, clear fury. My mom reached out to grab my arm. "Maya, wait. Let us handle this." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her face. Handle what, Mom? The break-in you ordered? Or the squatters you somehow didn't know about? Her grip tightened. Don't be dramatic. There's obviously been some mistake. The only mistake, I said, pulling my arm away, was trusting you with my key. I looked around the table. At my dad, who couldn't meet my eyes. At Ethan, who looked like he wanted to disappear. At Jessica, who suddenly seemed very interested in her phone. At the family friends, who were pretending they couldn't hear every word. Thank you all for coming to my birthday dinner. I'm sorry to cut it short, but apparently I have a police emergency to deal with. Mom, Dad, the bill is on the table. For once, you can pay for your own meal. I walked out into the rain. It was coming down hard now, the kind of Pacific Northwest downpour that soaks you through in seconds. I didn't care. I got in my car, my too-old car that I'd paid for myself, that ran perfectly fine despite my mother's constant criticism, and drove toward downtown, toward my apartment, toward whatever nightmare was waiting for me there. The drive should have taken 20 minutes. I made it in 12. I broke probably half a dozen traffic laws, but I didn't care. My phone kept buzzing with calls from my mom, texts from Ethan, but I ignored them all. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. I kept seeing my mother's face, the whisper, the planning, the casual cruelty of it all. She'd known. Whatever was in that apartment, she'd known about it, and she was trying to change the locks to hide it from me. When I turned onto Pine Street, I saw the police cars immediately. 3 of them, their lights painting blue and red patterns across the wet pavement. Yellow police tape was stretched across the entrance to my building. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, huddling under umbrellas, watching the drama unfold. I recognized some of them, people I'd seen when I'd visited Grandma Rose, people who'd smiled and waved and told me how much they'd miss her. I parked illegally, didn't care about the ticket I'd probably get. A uniformed officer approached me as I got out of the car. Ma'am, this is a restricted area. I'm Maya Chen. I got a text from someone at Seattle PD. This is my apartment. His expression changed immediately. Ms. Chen, I'm Officer Rodriguez. Sergeant Torres is waiting for you inside. This way, please. He lifted the police tape, and I ducked under it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. We walked through the lobby. I'd been here hundreds of times, visiting Grandma Rose, but it felt different now. Foreign. Like I was walking into a crime scene, which, I realized, I was. The elevator ride to the 12th floor took an eternity. Officer Rodriguez didn't say anything, just stood there with his hand resting on his belt, professionally neutral. I wanted to scream at him to tell me what was happening, but I bit my tongue. I'd find out soon enough. The elevator doors opened and I saw more police. Officers in the hallway. Someone taking photographs. Another person dusting for fingerprints on Grandma Rose's door. The door was open. I could see into the apartment. The lights were on, just like Ethan had said. And there were people inside. Strangers in Grandma Rose's home. A woman in plain clothes approached me. Late 40s, maybe early 50s, with sharp eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a bun. Ms. Chen, I'm Sergeant Maria Torres. Thank you for getting here so quickly. What's going on? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Why are there police at my apartment? We received a disturbance call from a neighbor about an hour ago. A man was seen attempting to break into this unit. When we arrived, we found 2 individuals inside, a woman and a teenage boy. They claim they have legal right to be here. Legal right. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. That's impossible. This is my apartment. My grandmother left it to me when she died 3 months ago. Sergeant Torres nodded slowly. That's what I suspected. Ms. Chen, I think you should come inside and hear what these people have to say. I followed her into the apartment, and it was like stepping into an alternate reality. The furniture was the same. Grandma Rose's comfortable couch, her antique coffee table, the bookshelf full of mysteries and historical fiction that she loved. But there were differences. A man's jacket hanging on the coat rack, shoes by the door that weren't mine, a backpack in the corner with what looked like school books spilling out. Someone had been living here. In Grandma Rose's home. In my home. There was a woman sitting on the couch. Mid-40s, I'd guess, with tired eyes and worry lines etched deep around her mouth. Next to her was a teenage boy, 16, maybe 17, who looked scared out of his mind. An officer stood nearby, taking notes. Sergeant Torres gestured toward them. "Ms. Chen, this is Denise Carter and her son Marcus. They've been living here for the past 3 weeks." I stared at them. 3 weeks. Almost a month. While I'd been working, taking care of Zoe, trying to grieve my grandmother, these strangers had been sleeping in her bed, using her things, living in the home she'd left to me. "I don't understand," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. "How did you get in here?" Denise reached into her bag, slowly, carefully, aware of the police watching her every move, and pulled out a folder. "I have a lease agreement," she said quietly. She handed the folder to Sergeant Torres, who opened it and began reading. "According to this," Torres said, looking at me, "Denise has a signed lease for this apartment. 12 months, starting 3 months ago. Rent is $2,400 per month, paid directly to—" She paused, her eyes scanning the document. "Patricia Chen." The floor tilted under my feet. "My mother." "Your mother doesn't own this apartment," Torres said. It wasn't a question. "No, I do. My grandmother, Rose Chen, left it to me in her will. Specifically to me. Not to my mother." My hands were shaking now. I pulled out my phone, found the PDF of the will my grandmother's lawyer had sent me. "Look, it's right here. To my granddaughter Maya Chen, I leave my apartment at 415 Pine Street, Unit 12B. There's even a clause specifically excluding my mother from having any claim to it." Torres read the will carefully, then looked back at the lease agreement. "Ms. Carter, where did you get this lease?" Denise looked confused. "From Patricia Chen. She said she was the property owner. We met through a rental listing online. She showed me the apartment. We signed the paperwork. I paid first and last month's rent in cash. She seemed completely legitimate." "Cash?" I asked. "You paid in cash?" She said she preferred it. Less hassle with banks and taxes. I didn't think anything of it. Plenty of landlords do cash rentals. $4,800. Just from Denise. My mother had taken $4,800 in cash from this woman and never told me. Torres was still examining the lease. "This document claims Patricia Chen had power of attorney over Rose Chen's estate. Do you know anything about that, Ms. Chen?" She didn't. Grandma Rose would never have given her power of attorney. They barely spoke the last few years of her life because my mom kept trying to control everything. I felt sick. "Can I see that?" Torres handed me the lease. The signatures looked real. My mother's flowing handwriting, even a notary stamp at the bottom. But the document claiming power of attorney was obviously forged. The dates were wrong for one thing. It was supposedly signed 2 years ago, but it referenced Grandma Rose's death, which had only happened 3 months ago. A sloppy forgery. My mother had been so confident she wouldn't get caught that she hadn't even bothered to make it convincing. "Ms. Chen," Torres said gently, "I think your mother has been illegally subletting your property." The words hung in the air. Illegally subletting. My own mother was a criminal. A thief. She'd stolen from me. From her own daughter. "But wait," I said, my mind racing. "Denise said she's been here for 3 weeks. The lease is dated 3 months ago. Where are the other tenants?" Denise shifted uncomfortably. "Patricia told me I was the 4th tenant. She said the previous 3 had moved out. Personal reasons, job changes, that kind of thing. She said she'd had bad luck with tenants lately, but that I seemed much more stable. 4 tenants. My mother had been cycling through tenants for 3 months. 3 months, since the day Grandma Rose died. Maybe even before. How did you find the listing? I asked Denise. Craigslist. It's been reposted a few times. I noticed because I'd been searching for apartments in this area for months. Every few weeks, a new listing would go up for this same address. Same photos, slightly different descriptions. I looked at Torres. Can you check that? The Craigslist listings? She nodded to Officer Rodriguez, who immediately pulled out his phone. On it. I turned back to Denise. Did my mother ever mention me? Did she ever say anything about the actual owner of the apartment? Denise hesitated. She mentioned a daughter. Said you were struggling. That you'd inherited the apartment but weren't capable of managing it properly. She said she was helping you out by handling the rental side of things while you got your life together. She looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was a scam. She seemed so professional, so put together. I never thought, it's not your fault, I said, even though I wanted to scream. Even from a distance, my mother was destroying my reputation. Telling strangers that I was incompetent, unstable, couldn't handle adult responsibilities. Painting herself as the hero while she robbed me blind. Officer Rodriguez looked up from his phone. Found it. There are 7 listings total, dating back 3 months. All for this address. All posted by the same account, though it's under a fake name. 7 listings. 7 tenants. Maybe more. I did the math quickly. If my mother was charging $2,400 per month, and she'd been doing this for 3 months, rotating tenants every few weeks. Sergeant Torres, I said, my voice shaking with rage now. How much money are we talking about here? Torres was already doing the calculation. If she had 4 tenants at $2,400 each, even with gaps between rentals, we're looking at least $28,000. $28,000. My mother had stolen $28,000 from me, from her own daughter. While I worked 60-hour weeks trying to make ends meet, while I scraped together money for Zoe's school supplies and her birthday presents, while I drove a too-old car because I couldn't afford a new one, my mother was stealing from me. I want to see the rest of the apartment, I said. Torres nodded. Of course. It's still your property. Denise, Marcus, please remain here with Officer Rodriguez. I walked through the apartment like I was in a dream, a nightmare. The bedroom, Grandma Rose's bedroom, where I'd sat with her during those final weeks, had someone else's clothes in the closet. The bathroom had toiletries I didn't recognize. The kitchen had food in the refrigerator that Denise had bought, had paid for, thinking she was living in her legal rental home. But it was in the spare room, Grandma Rose's craft room, where she'd done her sewing and kept her collections, that we found the real evidence. Hidden in the back of the closet, behind a stack of storage boxes, was a lockbox. The kind you'd use to store important documents or valuables. It wasn't even locked. Just sitting there, like my mother had been so confident she'd never be caught that she didn't bother hiding it properly. Inside the lockbox, cash. Stacks and stacks of cash, bundled with rubber bands. Torres pulled out the bundles carefully, counting. $18,000, she said. $18,000 in cash, plus the deposits from Denise and however many other tenants had paid by check or direct deposit. My mother had built a whole illegal enterprise out of stealing from me. But there was more in the lockbox. Lease agreements, copies of all of them, with different names. I recognized some of the names from the Craigslist listings Officer Rodriguez had pulled up. There were also documents that made my blood run even colder. The original deed to the apartment, which should have been filed with the county, but hadn't been. Grandma Rose's death certificate, and forged transfer documents, official-looking papers attempting to transfer ownership of the apartment from me to my mother. She was trying to steal the whole property, I whispered. Not just rent it out illegally. She was actually trying to take it from me. Torres was photographing everything with her phone. Ms. Chen, this is serious fraud. We're talking about multiple felonies here. Grand theft, forgery, illegal subletting, possibly identity theft if she used your information on any of these documents. She looked at me seriously. Are you prepared to press charges against your mother? Was I prepared? I thought about all the years of criticism, all the times she'd made me feel small and stupid and incompetent, all the times she'd prioritized my brother over me, prioritized appearances over honesty, prioritized her own desires over everyone else's needs. I thought about Grandma Rose, who'd loved me enough to give me this gift, to protect me even after her death. And I thought about Zoe, my daughter, who needed to learn that you don't let people hurt you, even when those people are supposed to love you. Yes, I said. I want her arrested. I want her charged with everything you can throw at her. And I want it on record that she did this, that Patricia Chen is a thief and a fraud and a criminal. Torres nodded approvingly. Good. I'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a full statement. Bring any documentation you have, the will, proof of your identity, any communication you've had with your mother about the apartment. We'll build a case. As we continued searching the apartment, more evidence piled up. In the desk drawer, we found a notebook where my mother had been keeping meticulous records. Tenant names, dates, amounts paid, even notes about problem tenants who'd asked too many questions. It was like a criminal's ledger. She documented her own crimes in neat, organized detail. We also found emails. My mother had been using a fake email account to communicate with tenants, but she'd printed out copies of important messages and kept them in a folder. Why? I couldn't understand it. Maybe she'd been planning to use them as proof that she'd been managing the property on my behalf. Maybe she was just compulsively organized. Either way, it was a gift to the prosecution. One email in particular made me want to vomit. It was to a tenant named Robert Kim, dated 6 weeks ago. He'd asked about meeting the property owner, about getting some repairs done properly. My mother's response: the owner is my daughter, but she's currently dealing with some personal issues. Mental health struggles, financial instability. I'm managing the property on her behalf until she's capable of handling it herself. Please direct all concerns to me. Mental health struggles, financial instability. She'd told strangers that I was crazy and incompetent, while stealing from me. Officer Rodriguez had been searching the living room and called out, "Sergeant, you need to see this." We found him holding a different folder. Inside were more documents, statements from a bank account I didn't recognize. But it had my social security number on it. My mother had opened a bank account in my name and had been depositing tenant payments into it, then transferring the money out to her own account. Identity theft. Federal crime. Jesus, Torres muttered. She really went all out, didn't she? I couldn't speak. The scope of the betrayal was so massive, so calculated, that I couldn't process it. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of desperation. This was a months-long criminal enterprise, meticulously planned and executed. My mother had put more effort into stealing from me than she'd ever put into actually being my mother. We'd been in the apartment for almost 2 hours when Torres's phone rang. She answered, listened, then looked at me. "Ms. Chen, your mother is here. She's downstairs demanding to be let in." Of course she was. Of course she'd followed me here, probably with my dad in tow, ready to spin some story that would make this all somehow okay. Ready to manipulate and gaslight and turn this around on me somehow. "I want to talk to her," I said. Torres hesitated. "I don't advise that." "Anything you say could potentially complicate the case? I don't care. I need to face her. I need her to know that I know everything." Torres studied my face for a long moment. then nodded. Okay. But Officer Rodriguez and I will be present the entire time. Don't touch her. Don't threaten her. Just talk. We went downstairs. My mother was in the lobby, and she'd brought reinforcements. My dad was there, and Ethan, and even Jessica. A whole Chen family delegation, ready to do damage control. When my mother saw me, her face went through a rapid series of expressions. Relief, then anger, then something calculating. Maya, thank God. We've been so worried. What's going on? The police wouldn't tell us anything. Cut the act, Mom. My voice was cold. Colder than I'd ever heard it. I know everything. Her eyes flickered. Know what? Honey, you're not making sense. I know about the tenants. All of them. I know about the fake leases, the forged power of attorney, the bank account you opened in my name. I know about the $18,000 in cash hidden in Grandma Rose's closet. I know that you've been stealing from me since the day she died. The lobby went silent. My dad's face went white. Ethan looked like he might pass out. Jessica took a step back, like she wanted to distance herself from the whole situation. My mother's mask finally cracked. You don't understand. I was protecting your inheritance. You're not capable of managing a property like this. Stop. I held up my hand. Don't you dare try to spin this as something you did for me. You stole from me. You forged documents. You committed fraud and identity theft. You told strangers that I was mentally unstable. You tried to steal the one thing Grandma Rose left me, the one thing she specifically said you couldn't have. Your grandmother was senile at the end, my mother hissed. She didn't know what she was doing. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew you'd try to take it from me. That's why she put that clause in her will. Under no circumstances is Patricia Chen to have access to this property. She knew who you really are, Mom. It just took me 32 years to figure it out. My mother lunged forward, but my dad caught her arm. For once, he looked ashamed. Patricia, stop. Just stop. Don't you dare take her side, my mother spat at him. After everything I've done for this family. Everything you've done? I laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. You've destroyed this family. You've lied, stolen, manipulated, and abused. And you did it all while pretending to be the perfect mother. Well, guess what? Perfect mothers don't commit felonies against their own children. Sergeant Torres stepped forward. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to need you to come down to the station for questioning. Questioning? This is ridiculous. Maya, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. It's $28,000 in theft. It's fraud. It's identity theft. And I'm pressing charges. Against you and anyone who helped you. I looked at my dad. Did you know? Did you help her? He wouldn't meet my eyes. That was answer enough. Dad signed some of the documents, Ethan said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He was pale, shaking, but he continued. I saw them. One of the fake transfer documents has his signature on it. He helped Mom try to steal the apartment from you. My mother whirled on him. You little traitor. No, Ethan said, and his voice was stronger now. I'm done. I'm done watching you hurt people and pretending it's love. I'm done being your accomplice. Maya deserves better. She's always deserved better. Torres nodded to Officer Rodriguez. Take Mr. Chen's statement. If he's willing to testify, we'll need his cooperation. My dad finally spoke, his voice defeated. I'll cooperate. Patricia, I'm sorry. I should have stopped you. Sorry? My mother's voice was rising now, shrill and desperate. You're all sorry? Fine. Be sorry. But don't come crying to me when this family falls apart. Mom, I said quietly, this family fell apart years ago. We've just been pretending it was still intact. But I'm done pretending. And I'm done letting you hurt me. The police took them away. my mother in one car, my father in another, for separate questioning. Ethan stayed behind, sitting on the lobby bench with his head in his hands. Jessica stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. I walked over to my brother. Part of me wanted to yell at him, to rage about how he'd tried to break into my apartment, how he'd been complicit in this nightmare. But looking at him, really looking at him, I saw someone who'd been trapped in the same web I'd been caught in for 32 years. The difference was, I was finally cutting myself free. "Ethan," I said. He looked up at me, eyes red. "Why did you do it?" "I didn't know," he said, and his voice broke. "I swear to God, Maya, I didn't know what she'd been doing. When she told me to change your locks tonight, she said it was because you'd been acting erratic, that you'd been threatening to do something dangerous with the apartment. She said you were going to hurt yourself and we needed to intervene before you did something stupid." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I believed her. I always believe her. Because she's our mom, and I thought mothers don't lie about things like that. "But when you got to the apartment," I said, "when you saw someone was living there, you knew then, didn't you?" He nodded miserably. "I called her from the car, before the police came. I told her there were people inside and she panicked. Like, really panicked. Started talking fast, saying she could explain, that it was complicated, that I needed to get out of there before anyone saw me. That's when I knew. That's when I realized she'd been lying about everything." Jessica spoke up for the first time. "I told him to tell you. In the car on the way back to the restaurant. I said he needed to warn you, that this was going to blow up and you deserved to know. But he was scared." She looked at Ethan with something like pity. He's always been scared of her. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "Maya, I am so sorry. I should have questioned her years ago. I should have stood up for you. I should have seen what she was doing to you, to both of us. But it was easier to just go along with it, to be the good son, to do what she wanted, to not make waves." He stood up, facing me fully. "But I'm done. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know. Every conversation, every time I saw her do something shady and looked the other way. All of it." I wanted to forgive him. Part of me wanted to hug him and tell him it was okay, that we could rebuild our relationship. But I couldn't. Not yet. The wound was too fresh, too deep. "Thank you," I said instead, "for being willing to testify. That's going to help." He nodded, understanding that forgiveness wasn't coming today. Maybe not ever. That was something he'd have to live with. I went back upstairs. Denise and Marcus were still there, looking exhausted and scared. Sergeant Torres was finishing up with the evidence collection. "What's going to happen to them?" I asked, nodding toward Denise and her son. "They're victims too," Torres said. "They paid rent in good faith. They won't be charged with anything, but they will need to find a new place to live." I looked at Denise, this woman who'd been scammed by my mother, who'd thought she was finally finding a stable home for herself and her son. "How much notice do you need?" I asked. She blinked, surprised I was talking to her. We've been looking for places. Everything in Seattle is so expensive. Maybe a month, if that's okay?" "You can have 2 months," I said. "At half the rent my mother was charging you. $1,200 a month instead of $2,400. Consider it compensation for what she put you through." Denise's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do that." "I know, but my grandmother would have wanted me to. She believed in taking care of people. And you and Marcus, you're victims of my mother's crimes just like I am. Maybe more, because at least I knew what kind of person she was. You didn't." Torres gave me an approving look. "That's very generous, Ms. Chen. I'll make sure it's noted in the case file. Shows goodwill on your part." By the time I left the apartment that night, it was past midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining under the streetlights. I sat in my car for a long time, just breathing, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning I'd woken up thinking it was just another birthday, another year older, another family dinner to survive. I'd had no idea that by the end of the night, my entire family would be imploded. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Karen, one of the few people I'd invited to the dinner who'd actually been kind to me. Just heard from Jessica. Are you okay? Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Oh my God, Maya. What the hell happened? I told her everything. The whisper, the break-in, the tenants, the money, all of it. She listened without interrupting, occasionally gasping or swearing under her breath. Your mother is actually insane, she said when I finished. Like, clinically insane. Who does that to their own kid? Someone who's never actually seen me as a person, I said. Just as an extension of herself. Something she could control and use. What are you going to do now? Press charges. Build a case. Make sure she faces consequences for once in her miserable life. I took a breath. And then, I'm going to figure out how to move forward. How to build a life that's actually mine, not one she's got her claws in. You're so much stronger than you know, Karen said softly. I've watched you survive her for years. Now you get to do more than survive. You get to actually live. After we hung up, I drove to my real apartment, the small 2-bedroom place where Zoe and I lived, where my babysitter was probably asleep on the couch by now. I needed to see my daughter, to hold her and remember what was actually important. The babysitter, a sweet college student named Mia, was indeed asleep on the couch. I woke her gently, paid her extra because it was so late, and sent her home. Then I went into Zoe's room. She was sleeping peacefully, her dark hair spread across her pillow, her little hand clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. She looked so innocent, so perfect, so completely untouched by the ugliness that had happened tonight. I sat on the edge of her bed and just watched her breathe. This was why I was doing this. Not for revenge. Though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. But mainly to protect her. To make sure she never had to grow up with the kind of manipulation and abuse I'd endured. To show her that standing up to toxic people, even when those people are family, was not just okay, but necessary. I love you, baby girl, I whispered. I promise I'm going to make things better. For both of us. The next morning came too soon. I'd gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep, and those 3 hours were filled with nightmares. My alarm went off at 6:30. I had to be at the police station by 9 to give my statement. I also had to call my supervisor at the hospital and tell her I needed a few days off. Family emergency, which was technically true, even if it wasn't the kind of family emergency anyone would expect. Zoe woke up cheerful and chatty, like always. Mommy, did you have a good birthday? I made her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes, and watched her eat. How could I explain to a 6-year-old that her grandmother was a criminal, that we might not see Grandma Patricia anymore, or Grandpa Richard, or maybe even Uncle Ethan for a while? Sweetie, I said carefully, Grandma Patricia did something really bad. She's in trouble with the police. Zoe's eyes went wide. Like bad guys on TV? Kind of. She took something that didn't belong to her, and that's against the law. Did she say sorry? Oh, my sweet, innocent child. No, baby, she didn't. And that's one of the reasons she's in so much trouble. When you do something wrong, you're supposed to say sorry and try to make it right. Grandma didn't do that. Zoe thought about this for a moment, then nodded sagely. At school, if you take someone's toy and don't say sorry, you get time out. Exactly. Grandma is getting a grown-up version of time out. How long? I don't know yet. Maybe a really long time. She seemed to accept this with the flexibility that kids have. For her, the world was still mostly simple. Bad actions had consequences. That was just how things worked. She didn't yet understand how complicated it got when the person doing bad things was someone who was supposed to love you. I dropped Zoe off at school. She went running off to play with her friends without a backward glance, and then drove to the police station. Sergeant Torres met me in the lobby, along with a detective I hadn't met before. Detective Raymond Park, specializing in financial crimes. We spent 4 hours going through everything. I showed them the will, Grandma Rose's death certificate, proof of my identity, every text message and email I'd ever exchanged with my mother about the apartment. Detective Park took copious notes, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions. "Your mother was very thorough," he said at one point. "Almost too thorough. It's like she wanted to get caught." "She didn't think she'd get caught," I corrected. "She thought I was too weak, too stupid, too conditioned to obey her to ever stand up and fight back. She miscalculated." He smiled grimly. "Yes, she did. And that miscalculation is going to cost her dearly." They told me the charges they were filing: grand theft in the first degree, forgery, identity theft, fraud, illegal subletting. My father was being charged as an accessory to fraud for signing the forged transfer documents. The district attorney was reviewing the case and would likely add more charges once they finished their investigation. "What kind of sentence are we looking at?" I asked. "For your mother? Given the amount of money involved and the number of victims, we're looking at anywhere from 2 to 5 years in prison. Plus restitution. She'll have to pay back every penny she stole, plus additional damages to the tenants she scammed. And there will be fines. Substantial ones." "And my father?" "Probably probation and community service, assuming he cooperates fully and testifies against your mother. He's a first-time offender, and his role was less significant. The prosecutor might push for more, but realistically, probation is most likely. 2 to 5 years. My mother could spend the next 5 years in prison." Part of me felt triumphant. She deserved it, deserved to face real consequences for once in her life. But another part of me felt, I don't even know what. Sad? Relieved? Guilty? It was a complicated tangle of emotions that I couldn't sort out. "There's one more thing," Torres said. "We talked to some of the other neighbors in your grandmother's building. A woman named Mrs. Nakamura says she has information that might be relevant." "Mrs. Nakamura?" I remembered her. She'd lived next door to Grandma Rose for 20 years. They'd been friends, had tea together every week. At Grandma's funeral, Mrs. Nakamura had hugged me and told me how much Rose had loved me. "What kind of information?" "She says your mother spread rumors about you. Told neighbors you were mentally unstable, that you were having a breakdown after your grandmother's death. That you couldn't be trusted to make decisions about the property. Mrs. Nakamura says she never believed it, but other neighbors did. Your mother was building a narrative to explain why she needed to take control of the apartment. Mentally unstable. There it was again. My mother's favorite weapon. Whenever I disagreed with her, whenever I set boundaries, whenever I tried to stand up for myself, I was being emotional, irrational, unstable. And apparently, she'd been telling that lie to anyone who would listen. "I want to talk to Mrs. Nakamura," I said. Torres nodded. "I thought you might. I have her number if you want to call her." I called from the station. Mrs. Nakamura answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Maya, Sergeant Torres said you might contact me." "Mrs. Nakamura, I heard you talk to the police." "Thank you for that." "Oh, honey, I should have said something sooner. I should have known something was wrong when Patricia started showing the apartment to strangers. But she was so convincing. She said you'd asked her to help, that you were too grief-stricken to handle it yourself." She paused. "But Rose told me, before she died. She told me to watch out for you, That Patricia would try to take the apartment from you. She made me promise to tell you the truth if anything strange happened. My throat tightened. Even after death, Grandma Rose was trying to protect me. She was right, I said. About everything. My mother stole from me. For months. And she almost got away with it. But she didn't. Because you're stronger than she ever gave you credit for. Mrs. Nakamura's voice was fierce now. Your grandmother knew that. She told me, Maya has steel in her spine. She just doesn't know it yet. But when she finally stands up, Patricia won't know what hit her. I was crying now, silently, tears running down my face while I sat in this sterile police conference room. I miss her so much. I know, sweetheart. But she's proud of you. I know she is. You're doing exactly what she hoped you would do. Standing up for yourself, protecting what's yours, refusing to be bullied anymore. After I hung up with Mrs. Nakamura, Detective Park pushed a box of tissues across the table. You okay? Yeah, I said, wiping my eyes. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm finally doing the right thing. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. The district attorney's office moved fast once they saw how much evidence there was. My mother was formally arrested and charged. She made bail, $50,000, which apparently she paid using money from one of her hidden accounts. More stolen funds, probably. My father was released on his own recognizance after agreeing to cooperate fully. Ethan did testify, just like he'd promised. He told the investigators everything he knew, every suspicious conversation he'd overheard, every time my mother had made him lie or cover for her, every instance where he'd seen her manipulate situations to get what she wanted. It was damning testimony, and I knew it must have been hard for him. Whatever else he was, Ethan loved our mother, or at least, he loved the idea of what a mother should be. Jessica broke off their engagement. I heard about it through Karen, who heard it from someone else in the family. Apparently, Jessica had told Ethan that she couldn't marry into a family this dysfunctional, couldn't tie her life to people who thought fraud and manipulation were acceptable family values. I felt bad for Ethan, but I also understood. Jessica was protecting herself. That's what you have to do sometimes. The story made the local news. Seattle woman arrested for defrauding daughter out of inherited property. It was a headline that made me cringe, but also felt validating. People needed to know what she'd done. Not because I wanted to humiliate her, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a small bonus, but because predators like my mother rely on silence. They rely on their victims being too ashamed or too scared to speak up. Well, I wasn't ashamed anymore. And I definitely wasn't scared. The extended family's reactions were mixed. Some of them believed my mother's version of events, that I was unstable, that I'd somehow set her up, that this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Those people I cut off immediately, deleted their numbers, blocked them on social media, made it clear they were no longer welcome in my or Zoe's life. But others surprised me. My father's sister, Aunt Linda, called me to apologize for not seeing what Patricia was doing sooner. She said she'd always thought my mother was difficult, but hadn't realized the extent of her manipulation. She offered to testify as a character witness if I needed one, to talk about the years of emotional abuse she'd witnessed. I thanked her and took her up on the offer. My mother's brother, Uncle Tom, actually laughed when I told him what had happened. Not a mean laugh, a relieved one. Finally, he said. Finally, someone stood up to her. Maya, your mother has been pulling this kind of crap for decades. She stole from me when we were kids, forged my signature on documents when we were adults, tried to manipulate me out of my share of our parents' estate. But I never had proof. Not like you do. I'm proud of you for fighting back. It was strange hearing these stories, realizing that I wasn't my mother's only victim, that this was a pattern, a way of being she'd perfected over a lifetime. It made me feel less alone, less crazy for thinking she was as bad as she was. But it also made me angry. If she'd been doing this for decades, why hadn't anyone stopped her sooner? Why had everyone just let her get away with it? The answer, I realized, was because stopping her required sacrifice. It required being willing to blow up family relationships, to face confrontation, to risk being labeled as the troublemaker. Most people weren't willing to pay that price. They found it easier to just stay away from her, to manage her in small doses, to quietly distance themselves while letting her continue preying on whoever her current target was. Well, I was willing to pay that price, because the alternative, continuing to live under her thumb, continuing to let her steal from me and lie about me and destroy my peace, was no longer acceptable. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after my birthday. I had to testify about the will, about my relationship with my grandmother, about when I discovered the apartment was being rented out. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Diana Reeves, prepared me thoroughly. "Your mother's lawyer is going to try to paint you as the problem," Diana warned me. "They'll say you were unreliable, that your mother had legitimate concerns about your ability to manage the property, that she was acting in your best interest. They might even suggest you're making this up for attention, or because you're angry about something unrelated." "Let them try," I said. "I have documentation for everything. Bank statements showing I've been financially stable for years. Performance reviews from my job showing I'm a competent professional. Character witnesses who'll testify that I'm a good mother and a responsible adult. They can paint whatever picture they want. The evidence tells the truth." Diana smiled. "Good. That's exactly the right attitude. Don't get defensive. Don't get emotional. Just stick to the facts." The day of the hearing arrived. I wore my best professional clothes, a navy blue dress with a blazer, minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back in a neat bun. I wanted to look competent, composed, nothing like the unstable daughter my mother had described to the neighbors. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. My mother sat at the defense table with her lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a perfect suit who probably cost more than I made in 6 months. She was dressed impeccably, too, in a cream-colored pantsuit that made her look respectable and motherly. When she saw me walk in, her face remained completely neutral. No recognition, no emotion, nothing. Like I was a stranger, not the daughter she'd birthed and raised and betrayed. My father was in the back row, looking smaller somehow, diminished. Ethan sat a few rows behind him, with Aunt Linda beside him for moral support. Karen was there too, right behind the prosecutor's table, ready to support me if I needed it. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Judge Martha Richardson, called the hearing to order. The prosecutor presented the evidence: the fake leases, the forged documents, the bank account opened in my name, the $18,000 in cash, the testimony from tenants, the statements from neighbors. It was overwhelming, damning, undeniable. Then my mother's lawyer stood up to present her defense. And just like Diana had warned me, he tried to paint my mother as the victim. "Your Honor, my client is a concerned mother who was trying to help her daughter during a difficult time. Miss Chiuwars, Maya Chen, had recently lost her grandmother, was struggling as a single mother, working long hours in a demanding job. Patricia Chen was simply trying to ease her daughter's burden by managing a property that Maya was not equipped to handle." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. The lawyer continued. "The money my client collected from tenants was always intended to be passed on to her daughter. She was simply holding it in trust, managing it until Maya was in a better place emotionally to handle these responsibilities." "Then why," Judge Richardson interrupted, "did she not inform her daughter about any of this? Why hide the tenants, the lease agreements, the money? If her intentions were pure, why all the secrecy?" The lawyer hesitated. My client believed that if her daughter knew, she would make impulsive decisions that would jeopardize the property value. She was protecting the asset. By committing multiple felonies? The judge's tone was dry. Interesting interpretation of protecting. Then it was my turn to testify. I swore on the Bible to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I did. I told them about my relationship with my grandmother, about how capable I'd been of managing my own life for 32 years, about how my mother had systematically lied to neighbors and tenants to cover her crimes. I spoke clearly, calmly, presenting fact after fact after fact. My mother's lawyer tried to rattle me during cross-examination. Ms. Chen, isn't it true that you've had conflicts with your mother for years? That you've always resented her success? I've had conflicts with my mother because she's controlling and manipulative, I said evenly. And I don't resent her success. I resent her crimes. Isn't it possible you've misinterpreted her actions? That what you see as theft was actually a mother trying to help? No, because a mother trying to help doesn't forge documents, doesn't open bank accounts using her daughter's social security number without permission, doesn't tell neighbors that her daughter is mentally unstable, doesn't hide $18,000 in cash. These aren't the actions of someone trying to help. These are the actions of a criminal. The lawyer pressed on, but I didn't break. Diana had prepared me well. For every attack, I had a calm, factual response. No emotion, no drama, just truth. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I caught my mother's eye for the first time. She was staring at me with pure hatred. Not disappointment, not hurt, just cold, vicious hatred. And in that moment, I knew. She didn't feel guilty. She didn't regret what she'd done. She was just angry that she'd been caught. Angry that I'd had the audacity to stand up to her. That look told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mother who'd made mistakes. This wasn't someone who could be redeemed with therapy or time or forgiveness. This was who she fundamentally was. A predator who'd been caught and resented her prey for fighting back. The judge made her ruling swiftly. Based on the evidence presented, there is more than sufficient cause to proceed to trial. The defendant will remain free on bail, but is ordered to have no contact with the victim, Maya Chen, or her minor daughter. Violation of this order will result in immediate incarceration. It was a victory, but it didn't feel as good as I'd hoped. Maybe because it wasn't really over yet. The trial was still to come. No, I'm not through yet. I'm continuing with the story based on the outline. Let me continue from where I left off. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. 3 months of waiting, of anxiety, of wondering if justice would actually be served, or if my mother would somehow find a way to escape consequences like she always had. But I used that time productively. I worked with Diana Reeves to build an airtight case. I tracked down every tenant my mother had scammed. There were 7 in total, not just the 4 Denise had mentioned. 7 people who'd paid deposits and rent, who'd been cycled through the apartment every few weeks when they started asking too many questions, or when my mother got paranoid, they'd discover her fraud. One of them was a single dad named Marcus Thompson, not to be confused with Denise's son Marcus. He'd paid my mother $4,800 for first month, last month, and deposit, then been kicked out after 3 weeks when he'd asked about getting a receipt for tax purposes. My mother had told him there was a family emergency, and he needed to leave immediately. She'd refunded half his deposit, $1,200, and kept the rest. When I tracked him down and told him what had happened, he was furious, but also relieved. He'd thought he'd been scammed but had no proof, no way to fight back. Now he did. Another tenant, a young woman named Sarah Lynn, had been told the apartment was being sold, and she needed to vacate within 48 hours. No notice, no apology, just a text message saying to be out by the weekend. She'd lost her deposit entirely, $2,400, because my mother claimed there was damage to the property. There was no damage. Sarah had photos proving the apartment was in perfect condition when she left. But she'd had no recourse, no way to fight a landlord who disappeared the moment she moved out. Every story made me angrier. Every victim added to the mountain of evidence. By the time we went to trial, we had 7 tenants willing to testify, plus Mrs. Nakamura, plus Ethan, plus Uncle Tom with his stories about my mother's lifelong pattern of fraud. We had bank records, forged documents, emails, text messages, photographs of the cash. We had everything. The trial lasted 2 weeks. 2 weeks of sitting in that courtroom, listening to my mother's lawyer try to spin a narrative where she was somehow the victim, where I was an ungrateful daughter, where the tenants were confused or lying, where the evidence was circumstantial or misinterpreted. It was exhausting, infuriating, but also strangely empowering, because no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't refute the facts. The evidence was overwhelming. I had to take time off work, which meant less money coming in. But my supervisor at the hospital was incredibly supportive. She told me to take whatever time I needed, that my job would be waiting for me when I got back. "We've got your back," she said. "What you're doing takes courage. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for it." Zoe stayed with Karen during the worst of it. I didn't want her in the courtroom, didn't want her exposed to the ugly details of what her grandmother had done. Karen took her to school, picked her up, made her dinner, helped with homework. She was the sister I'd never had, the family I'd chosen instead of the one I'd been born into. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Diana Reeves presented each piece of evidence carefully, building the story layer by layer. The forged power of attorney that gave my mother authority she'd never had. The lease agreements with 7 different tenants over 3 months. The bank account opened in my name without my knowledge or consent. The $18,000 in cash. The testimony from tenants who'd been scammed and intimidated. The emails where my mother had called me mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, emotionally unfit. When Mrs. Nakamura testified, she was a force of nature. 78 years old, barely 5 feet tall, but with the presence of someone who'd lived through too much to be intimidated by a courtroom. She looked directly at my mother as she spoke. "Patricia Chen is a liar and a thief. She always has been. Her own mother, my dear friend Rose, knew it. That's why Rose made sure Patricia couldn't get her hands on that apartment. Rose told me, Patricia will try to take it from Maya. She'll lie, she'll manipulate, she'll steal. But Maya is stronger than she knows, and when she finally stands up, Patricia won't be able to stop her." Rose was right. My mother's face remained impassive, but I saw her hands clench on the table. She hated being exposed like this, hated having her carefully constructed facade stripped away in public. Ethan's testimony was harder to watch. My brother sat in that witness stand and admitted his own complicity, his own cowardice. "I knew something was wrong," he said, his voice shaking. "I saw her listing the apartment online. I heard her on the phone with tenants. But I didn't want to believe my own mother was capable of something like this. So I convinced myself there was an explanation. That Maya had agreed to it somehow. That it was all legitimate." He looked at me then, eyes red. "I'm sorry, Maya. I should have protected you. Instead, I helped her hurt you." The defense tried to paint Ethan as a disgruntled son, someone with an axe to grind against his mother. But it didn't work. His testimony was too detailed, too consistent with all the other evidence. And besides, what reason would he have to lie? He was destroying his own relationship with his mother, burning bridges with half the family. The only reason to do that was because he was telling the truth. When it was my turn to testify again, this time for the actual trial, not just the preliminary hearing, I was ready. I'd practiced with Diana, had gone over every possible question and attack the defense might throw at me. And I stood there, under oath, and told my story. not with anger or bitterness, but with calm, clear honesty. I talked about growing up with a mother who saw me as property, not a person, about the constant criticism, the manipulation, the way she'd always made me feel like I was never good enough, about Grandma Rose, who'd been my safe haven, my protector, the one person in my family who truly loved me unconditionally, about the inheritance that was supposed to be my grandmother's final gift to me: security, stability, proof that someone had valued me enough to leave me something meaningful. And I talked about the betrayal, about discovering that my mother had been stealing from me for months, had been lying to strangers about my mental health, had forged documents and committed fraud and identity theft, all while pretending to be concerned about my well-being. About how she'd tried to lock me out of my own apartment on my birthday, how she'd used my brother as a tool in her schemes, how she'd shown no remorse even when caught. My mother didn't steal from me because she needed the money, I said, looking directly at the jury. She did it because she could. Because she spent her entire life taking what doesn't belong to her, manipulating people to get what she wants, and facing no consequences. She did it because in her mind, I'm not a person with rights and boundaries. I'm just an extension of her, something she owns and controls. Well, she doesn't own me, she doesn't control me, and she's going to face consequences for what she's done. The defense's cross-examination was brutal. My mother's lawyer tried everything, suggested I was mentally unstable, accused me of lying for attention, implied I was exaggerating my mother's behavior because of some childhood grudge. He brought up my divorce from Zoe's father, suggesting I had relationship problems that colored my perception of my mother. He even had the audacity to suggest that maybe I'd known about the tenants all along and was now fabricating this story to avoid sharing the rental income with my family. But I didn't break. For every accusation, I had documentation. For every insinuation, I had witnesses. Medical records showing I'd never been treated for any mental health crisis. Employment records showing I was a reliable, competent professional. Character witnesses, colleagues, friends, Zoe's teachers, testifying that I was stable, responsible, and honest. The defense's case fell apart under the weight of actual evidence. My mother never took the stand. Her lawyer advised against it, probably because he knew she'd either perjure herself or reveal exactly how cold and calculating she really was. So she just sat there, day after day, in her expensive clothes with her perfect hair and her expression of wounded dignity, playing the victim, acting like she was being persecuted for trying to help her ungrateful daughter. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. 8 hours that felt like 8 years. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with Karen and Aunt Linda, drinking terrible coffee from the vending machine and trying not to think about what would happen if they found my mother not guilty. If all of this, the evidence, the testimony, the months of legal proceedings, amounted to nothing because 12 strangers decided to believe her lies instead of my truth. But they didn't. When the bailiff called us back into the courtroom, when the jury foreman stood up and read the verdict, every charge came back the same. Guilty. Guilty of grand theft. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of identity theft. Guilty of forgery. Guilty on all counts. I watched my mother's face as the verdict was read. For the first time in my entire life, I saw her mask completely shatter. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened in shock. Her hands started shaking. She looked old suddenly, fragile, like the powerful persona she'd maintained for so long had finally collapsed under the weight of her own crimes. Part of me felt triumphant. Justice. Finally. After 32 years of abuse and manipulation, she was facing real consequences. But another part of me just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that my mother had chosen this path, had chosen money and control over having an actual relationship with her daughter. sad that she'd destroyed our family rather than just treat me with basic human decency. The judge set a sentencing date for 3 weeks later. My mother was remanded into custody immediately. Her bail was revoked upon conviction. I watched as the bailiffs handcuffed her and led her away. She didn't look at me, didn't say anything, just walked out of that courtroom with her head down, finally defeated. My father approached me afterward. He'd been in the courtroom every day, watching his wife be convicted of multiple felonies. He looked broken. "Maya," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her. I should have protected you." "Yes," I said. "You should have. Is there any way? Can we fix this? Can we rebuild some kind of relationship?" I looked at this man who'd stood by and watched his wife abuse me for decades, who'd signed forged documents to help her steal from me, who'd chosen her over me every single time it mattered. "I don't know, Dad. Maybe someday. But not now. Right now, I need space. I need to heal. And you need to figure out why you thought any of this was okay." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I understand. I'll wait. However long it takes." I didn't tell him that it might take forever, that some relationships, once broken, can't be repaired. I just walked away. 3 weeks later, I was back in that courtroom for sentencing. Diana had prepared a victim impact statement for me to read. I'd spent hours writing it, revising it, trying to find words that captured what my mother's crimes had cost me. When Judge Richardson called on me to speak, I stood up and walked to the microphone. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Your Honor, my mother stole $28,000 from me. But the financial loss isn't the worst part. She stole my sense of safety. She stole my ability to trust. She stole my grandmother's final gift. Not just the apartment, but the message it represented. The message that I was valued, that I was capable, that I deserved good things. She tried to take that from me. She tried to make me believe I was as incompetent and worthless as she'd always said I was. She spread lies about my mental health to neighbors and strangers. She forged my signature, opened accounts in my name, used my identity to commit crimes. She manipulated my brother into becoming her accomplice. She showed 7 different people, hardworking people just trying to find a decent place to live, that landlords can't be trusted, that the system doesn't protect tenants. But worst of all, she did it without remorse. Even now, even after being convicted, I don't believe she thinks she did anything wrong. She thinks she had a right to control me, to take from me, to lie about me. Because in her mind, I'm not a person. I'm property. I'm not asking for leniency. I'm asking for justice, real justice. The kind that says no one, not even a mother, has the right to abuse and steal from their own child. The kind that protects other people from becoming her future victims. Because if she faces no real consequences now, she'll do this again. To someone else. Maybe to other family members. Maybe to strangers. She needs to understand that her behavior has real costs. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I'm raising her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to know her own worth. Part of that means showing her that when someone hurts you, even someone who's supposed to love you, you don't stay silent. You fight back. You demand justice. You protect yourself and others. That's what I'm doing here today. Not out of revenge, though I won't pretend I don't feel some satisfaction seeing her face consequences, but out of necessity, because the cycle of abuse has to end somewhere, and I'm ending it here. I sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Richardson was looking at me with something like respect. Then she turned to my mother. "Patricia Chen, please stand." My mother stood. She looked smaller in her prison jumpsuit, without her expensive clothes and perfect makeup. Human. Ordinary. Not the powerful, untouchable figure she'd always seemed to be. Judge Richardson's voice was cold. Mrs. Chen, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen many kinds of criminals in my courtroom. Violent offenders, drug dealers, white-collar fraudsters. But what you did strikes me as particularly cruel. You didn't steal from a stranger. You stole from your own daughter. You violated her trust in the most fundamental way possible. And you did it methodically, deliberately, over a period of months, with no regard for the harm you were causing. The presentence report shows no remorse, no acceptance of responsibility, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. You continue to maintain that you were helping your daughter, that she somehow misunderstood your intentions. But the evidence tells a different story. The evidence shows a pattern of manipulation, fraud, and theft that goes back decades. This court takes into account that you have no prior criminal convictions, but that doesn't mean you haven't been committing crimes. It just means you haven't been caught until now. Based on the testimony we heard, you've been engaging in similar behavior for most of your adult life. You've simply been skilled at avoiding consequences. Until now. She looked down at her notes. On the charge of grand theft in the first degree, I sentence you to 4 years in the Washington State Correctional Facility for women. On the charges of fraud and identity theft, I sentence you to concurrent terms of 3 years each. On the charge of forgery, I sentence you to a concurrent term of 2 years. You will serve a minimum of 3 years before being eligible for parole. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to your daughter in the amount of $28,000 plus interest. You will also pay restitution to each of the 7 tenants you defrauded, totaling an additional $15,000. And you will pay fines totaling $50,000 to the state of Washington. Upon your release, you will be subject to 5 years of supervised probation. During that time, you are forbidden from having any contact with Maya Chen or her daughter without explicit written permission from both Maya and her attorney. Violation of this order will result in immediate reincarceration. Do you understand these terms? My mother's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Then this court is adjourned. Bailiff, please escort Mrs. Chen back to custody. And just like that, it was over. 4 years. My mother would spend the next 4 years in prison. She'd be 62 when she got out. An old woman, a convicted felon. Everything she'd valued, status, reputation, control, stripped away. I walked out of that courtroom into bright afternoon sunlight. Karen was waiting for me on the courthouse steps. She hugged me tight. How do you feel? I don't know, I said honestly. Relieved, I guess. But also empty. Like I spent all this energy fighting, and now that it's over, I don't know what to do with myself. You heal, Karen said simply. You take your time. You figure out who you are without her shadow over you, and you build the life you deserve. That's what I've been doing. 6 months have passed since my mother was sentenced. 6 months of therapy, of learning to set boundaries, of figuring out how to exist in the world without constantly looking over my shoulder waiting for her to sabotage me. The apartment, Grandma Rose's apartment, is officially mine now. All the legal paperwork has been processed. The deed is in my name. Everything is legitimate and proper. I kept Denise and Marcus as tenants for the full 2 months I'd promised them, at the reduced rate. When they moved out, I could have rented it to someone else. The income would have been helpful. But instead, I made a different choice. I turned it into what Grandma Rose would have wanted. The main bedroom is now a rental unit. I found a nice tenant, a young teacher named Amanda, who's quiet and responsible and takes good care of the space. The rental income goes directly into Zoe's college fund. But the second bedroom, the room that used to be Grandma Rose's craft room, I kept for myself, for me and Zoe. I decorated it with Grandma Rose's things, her photos, her recipe cards, her nursing cap from World War II that she'd kept in a shadow box, her favorite chair, her collection of vintage teacups. I added photos of my own, of Zoe as a baby, of Grandma Rose holding her for the first time, of the three of us together at Zoe's 5th birthday party. 3 generations of strong women. Zoe and I go there once a week. We call it Grandma Rose's room. We sit in her chair, drink hot chocolate from her teacups, and I tell Zoe stories about her great-grandmother, about how brave she was, how kind, how fierce, about how she stood up to people who tried to control her, about how she loved us both so much. "Why don't we see Grandma Patricia anymore?" Zoe asked me last week. I'd been dreading this question, but I'd also been preparing for it. Grandma Patricia made some really bad choices, baby. She hurt people. And when you hurt people, there are consequences. She's somewhere right now learning about those consequences. Will she say sorry? God, I hoped so. I hoped that somewhere in that prison, my mother was learning empathy, was realizing the harm she'd caused, was becoming a better person. But I doubted it. People like her rarely change. I don't know, I told Zoe. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, we're okay. We have each other. We have Grandma Rose's love, even though she's not here anymore. And we have lots of people who care about us. Like Aunt Karen? Exactly like Aunt Karen. Zoe thought about this, then nodded. Okay. Can I have more hot chocolate? Kids are resilient. They adapt. As long as they feel loved and safe, they can handle almost anything. I'm making sure Zoe feels both. Ethan and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. It's careful, tentative. He's in therapy now, working through his own issues with our mother. He sends me messages sometimes, apologies, updates on his life, questions about Zoe. I respond, but I keep my guard up. Trust has to be earned back, and that takes time. My father wrote me a letter from prison. Wait, no, he's not in prison. He got probation and community service, remember? He wrote me a letter from wherever he's living now. Some small apartment, probably. He lost his job when the news about the trial got out. His reputation is destroyed. He says he's sorry, that he wishes he'd been stronger, that he understands if I never forgive him. I haven't responded to the letter. I'm not ready. Maybe someday I will be. Or maybe I won't. Either way, it's my choice. For the first time in my life, I get to choose who's in my life and who isn't. That power, that freedom, is incredible. I started a support group. It meets once a month at a community center in Seattle. It's for people who've been victims of financial abuse by family members. We sit in a circle, drink coffee, and share our stories. Some of them make my situation look mild. Parents who drained their kids' college funds. Siblings who forged names on mortgage applications. Spouses who hid massive debts until it was too late. But what strikes me is how similar all the stories are. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the way the abusers convinced us that we were the problem. That we were too sensitive, or too suspicious, or too ungrateful. The way they used family loyalty as a weapon against us. And how hard it is to fight back. Because pressing charges against a family member feels like betrayal. Like you're the one breaking the family apart, even though they broke it first. But I tell my support group what I've learned. You're not breaking anything. You're just refusing to pretend it wasn't already broken. Some of them have pressed charges. Others haven't, aren't ready to, may never be ready to. I don't judge. Everyone has to make their own choice about how to handle their trauma. But I encourage them. I tell them my story. I show them that it's possible to stand up, to fight back, to win. That consequences are real, that justice exists, that you don't have to just accept abuse because it comes from family. I even got a call from a local news station. They wanted to do a follow-up story. Where are they now? Kind of thing. I agreed, but only on certain terms. No footage of Zoe, no discussion of my specific address or where I work. Just my story, in my words. The reporter asked me, "Do you have any regrets about turning in your own mother?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that she made choices that led to this point. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret protecting what was mine. And I don't regret showing my daughter that sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their actions." The interview aired last month. I got messages from strangers, some supportive, some calling me a horrible daughter, some sharing their own stories of family betrayal. I read the supportive ones. I deleted the critical ones. I responded to the people who needed someone to listen. One message in particular stuck with me. It was from a woman named Jennifer, about my age, who'd been in a similar situation with her father. He'd been stealing from her for years, small amounts that added up. She'd never said anything because he was her dad and she loved him, and wasn't family supposed to forgive? "Your story gave me courage," she wrote. "I confronted him. He denied it at first, but I had proof. We're working on it now. He's paying me back, going to therapy, trying to change. But if I hadn't seen your interview, if I hadn't realized it was okay to stand up for myself even against family, I would still be letting him steal from me. So thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to share your story." That message made everything worth it. The trial, the publicity, the pain. If my story helped even one person find their own courage, then it mattered. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. I still have bad days. Days where I miss the idea of having a mother, even though the reality of my mother was never what I needed. Days where I feel guilty, even though I know intellectually I have nothing to feel guilty about. Days where I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been born into a different family, one where love wasn't conditional and manipulation wasn't the primary form of communication. But I'm healing. Slowly, one day at a time. Zoe had her 7th birthday last month. We celebrated at Grandma Rose's apartment, my apartment now. Just a small party with a few of her school friends, Karen and her family, Aunt Linda, and yes, even Ethan. He brought Zoe a beautiful gift, a charm bracelet with little charms representing things she loves, a book, a star, a heart. As we sang Happy Birthday, and Zoe blew out her candles, I looked around at the people gathered there, my chosen family, the people who'd stood by me, supported me, believed me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Not happiness, not yet. Happiness would come later, but peace. The deep settled knowledge that I was finally safe, that I'd protected what was mine, that I'd stood up to my abuser and won, that I'd broken the cycle. After everyone left and Zoe was asleep on the couch, she'd worn herself out playing, I stood by the window looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars. The Space Needle glowed in the distance. Everything looked beautiful and possible. I thought about Grandma Rose, about her final gift to me, this apartment that had become so much more than just property. It was proof. Proof that someone had believed in me. Proof that I deserved good things. Proof that I was strong enough to fight for what was mine. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered to the night sky. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for teaching me that family isn't about blood. It's about love and respect and protection. Thank you for showing me what I was capable of." Somewhere out there, in a women's correctional facility, my mother was probably lying in a narrow prison bed, thinking about how unfair her life had turned out. How her ungrateful daughter had betrayed her. How she was the real victim in all of this. Let her think that. Let her spend the next few years nursing her resentment and her delusions. It didn't matter anymore. She couldn't hurt me. She had no power over me. She was just a woman in a cell, facing consequences she'd earned. and I was free. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 32 years old, 33 soon. I'm a pediatric nurse, a single mother, and a survivor. They tried to steal my inheritance. They tried to steal my story. But the truth doesn't stay buried. It grows roots and breaks through concrete. My mother's in prison. My father's a ghost. And me? I'm finally free. Grandma Rose didn't just leave me an apartment. She left me a lesson. Never let anyone, not even family, steal what's rightfully yours. If this story taught you something, hit subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And remember, locks can be changed, but your truth? That's yours to keep. Because at the end of the day, standing up for yourself isn't betrayal. It isn't cruel. It isn't unforgivable. It's survival. It's justice. It's freedom. And it's exactly what I deserved.